Hello, this is Jeff Jones, co-host of Community Voice PHL Talk Show. Thank you for tuning in to this special episode, The Ballot or the Bullet. This program is part of PhillyCAM's People Power Media Fest, our annual month-long celebration of community media. This year, we'll be paying attention to our members and neighbors who all throughout the area of Philadelphia who are building community power. Be sure to catch conversations, workshops, and special programming that will represent local stores and legacies of activism that continue to impact our lives from our neighborhoods to our policy makers. Tune in to be part of PhillyCAM's Fest on cable, radio, and online. For more information, check it out on ppmfest.org. That's ppmfest.org. With the continued rising of gun violence across the nation, and this being the approaching of election season on November 8th, during this episode, we'll be talking about the nod from a speech from Malcolm X, the ballot or the bullet. And as we look at this, we'll be addressing how do we reduce gun violence through the lens of political activism. From 2017 through 2021, there has been an average of about 1,750 gun-related crimes in the city of Philadelphia. More dramatically, it was noticed in 2020 when this was increased about 40% of gun-related crimes in that year. There has been various programs and there have been various initiatives that have been put in place in the city to help reduce gun violence, which even included the historic $155 million investment that the city put into place back in July of 2021, which this year it increased to $208 million. Now, however, with that investment, the gun violence still seems to be an increasing problem and challenge within our city, and we're going to look at how we can address that from the advocacy, again, of political activists. So in this episode, we'll be dealing, again, from the topic of the ballot or the bullet. How do we reduce gun violence through the lens of political action? And I'm honored to have on the show today Councilmember-At-Large Isaiah Thomas, activist Reuben Jones, founder of Frontline Dads, and community leader Curtis Segers, founder of Segers Foundation. Thank all of you for being on this special episode of Community Voice PHL Talk Show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, as I was mentioning, there's an apparent increase continuing with gun violence, and when we look at it from the lens of the political advocacy, we have to see how do we address this issue of gun violence. Are we wasting time waiting for change? But before I get into any of you answering that question, I'll start with you, Councilman Thomas. Of course, I already gave you your title. Just give a small introduction of yourself, and then you, Reuben, and then you also, Curtis, so that our guests and viewers can know a little bit more about yourself other than the esteemed titles that all of you hold.
Good afternoon, Jeff, and thank you to the esteemed panel. It's an honor to be here. Good afternoon to the listening audience. My name is Councilmember Isaiah Thomas. I'm a Councilmember-At-Large, which means I represent the entire city of Philadelphia. And of course, this is an important topic, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss it, especially with some credible, amazing people. So thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Reuben Jones. I'm the executive director of Frontline Dads, Inc. I'm also the campaign lead for Dignity and Power Now in Philadelphia. And I'm a social justice advocate and a staunch advocate to diminish gun violence in Philadelphia and address the underlying issues of poverty and neglect in our communities. And it's an honor to be here, so thank you.
Mr. Segers.
Yes, good afternoon, panelists. My name is Curtis III. I'm the CEO and founder of the Segers Foundation. I'm also the assistant principal of Mastery Charter School, and I'm on here for change. I'm on here with Councilman Thomas, you, Jeff, and Reuben to find out how do we stop the gun violence in Philadelphia and what resources is out there already. Thank you for having me.
Great. So now we've set the table. We know who our panelists are. So let's get into the conversation, gentlemen. As I mentioned, are we wasting time waiting for change? Since 2017, an average of 1,750 gun-related crimes have continued to occur in the city alone. Is it a level of bureaucracy that's holding up any change in regarding that, or what's the challenge behind that? Because we do need to get a grip on this and making sure that that number doesn't continue to surface in that area. So if either one of you want to jump in and address that.
I can't wait to go, but I'm gonna defer to the councilman just because I want to give him an opportunity to speak.
I'll go first. I do think that it's not a good idea to around change, right? Just the concept of waiting for change. I've always believed that we have to be the change that we want to see. When you talk about these issues around crime in the city of Philadelphia, no one person can cure it, just like no one person is responsible for it. So for me, I've tried my best to be as proactive as possible, specifically as it relates to prevention-based initiatives. That's my knack. That's my thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I do as good of a job as I can, giving
Mm-hmm.
young people an opportunity and a platform to be able to be involved in positive activities. That's just me personally, whether I'm a council member or not. When I put on my council member hat, when I look at this issue of the crime in the city of Philadelphia, there are a number of issues put in a position we're seeing a perfect way as it relates to idea that the city is lawless. But we can't just give up. We can't give up hope. Right now in the city of Philadelphia, we are seeing a lot of Black folks, especially middle-class Black people, deciding to leave the city. And that Black flight that we're seeing right now, honestly, is directly because of crime. It's not the schools. It's not the lack of opportunity. It's the crime that's putting people in a position where they're saying they need to leave the city. I can't blame them. I'm not, it's my job to try to convince them to stay. But at the same time, to specifically answer your question, Jeff, we can't wait around for change. We have to be the change that we want to see. And it requires everybody, getting off the bench and getting involved, getting in the game and doing whatever it is you can do. I don't think people should step outside of their lane. If your personality is like mine and you can do prevention-based initiatives, then you got to be in the game. You got to give young people as many platforms and opportunities as possible to be involved in positive activities. So that's my perspective of the crime issue. Why the issue exists, I think we're going to dissect that throughout the course of our conversation.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dominate this answer right here, but that would be my response to anybody who has become so, I guess you could say, desensitized by what they're seeing right now that they just want to quit. I do understand that, but I'm a student of history, and our ancestors have been through a lot. We've come a long way as Black people, and the last thing I think we should do is give up in the year 2022.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, Reuben, you deferred to have Isaiah go first because he kind of epitomizes change because he's a new council member himself who's hit the ground running. For those who are viewing this outside of Philadelphia, Councilmember Thomas is Councilmember-At-Large in Philadelphia, and he's hit the ground running, doing some amazing things. And he, again, epitomizes change because he's doing just that. So thanks for sharing that impact on change. And I know you wanted to jump in, Reuben, but I want to go to Curtis real quick because there were situations that happened around your school, Mr. Segers, and just want to make sure that we understand how you're implementing change in that area. For reducing this gun violence, in particular around your school and schools in general, in light of the fact that there were some incidents that happened recently around two schools in Philadelphia, one around Roxborough and one around Hardy-Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Just to piggyback off Councilman a little bit, I love it. We got to be the change. We can't wait for everybody else. We can't wait, blame it on one person. We can't blame it on government. We can't blame it on nothing. And no, we're not wasting our time. And like Jeff said, it's issues, our babies are dying left and right. So it's got to be all hands on deck. We got to get input from the neighbors, the stores, the community leaders, even the kids to come up with programs, not just come up with them, ask them, what do you need? Because it's not one size fit all. So in our neighborhood, we have a lot of community, projects like movie night, like, a water ice party, which sounds simple, but it's just another, way of getting kids inside of a safe area so they can, play with each other. But I think the one big key is, yes, we're attacking the kids and giving them resources, but we got to get inside them houses, inside the community, because a kid told me when they come to school, they feel the love, but they got to go back home and they deal with a lot. One kid told me, like, Segers, in school, we get a free meal, we feel the love, we go back home, my mom on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real issue. So yes, I do think we're not wasting our time. It starts with us, not just with the kids, but we gotta get inside the community and get programs for the whole community in general. And that's what we starting at Man Campus. That's what we're pushing for now, like a community project, not just the kids, but the whole community.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. We have to get the whole community in, and that's exactly what you do a lot of yourself, Reuben. And so, your response to, is there a delay or is there too much waiting going on?
So since the councilman mentioned get in the game, I'm gonna draw a sports analogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Eagles have been criticized for their wide receivers in the past. They went and got AJ Brown. He has size, he has strength, he has confidence
Mm-hmm.
to go attack the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see the difference that's made in the team. They're 4-0, right? Just having a person attack the ball. So I want to use that analogy in terms of gun violence and violence in general in our cities. So everybody has a role to play. Everybody has a specific skill or a specific area of interest. But we got to, when you say waiting, I think proactive prevention is the key. And I say that for a number of reasons. Yeah, positive recreation,
Mm-hmm.
education, employment for parents, like complete community investment, right? Because we have neighborhoods in Philadelphia that's been neglected for 50 years, right? And we see, that residual effect. So when we talk about gun violence, just understanding that we have people who have some mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
We have some people who have addiction issues. We have people who have like self-management issues like anger management. We have some people who just dug deep into that underbelly that, we
Right.
all know people this. They're not stratified. They are straight up street dudes, right? And women who they live by that code. So we can't neglect any of those people, right? Like whether you are dealing with addiction, mental health, or you just, thugged out for lack of a better word. And I think that the more we understand that and attack that, like address it proactively with
Mm-hmm.
energy and with vigor and with resources, and understand that it's a long-term commitment. There's no
Mm-hmm.
overnight successes. Then I think we could really stem the tide. Understand also the violence, there's an ebb and flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to come a natural downward spiral at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be careful of claiming early victories when that happened and make sure we continue to be invested in the long term. We saw in 2013 that the city experienced the lowest rate of gun violence in 50 years, where we had 248 homicides. We've more than double that now. And the only reason why I believe the only reason our uptick happens because we fell asleep at the wheel and believing that we had achieved a certain level of success and saying, okay, Philadelphia was the talk of, media across the country. The great job that Philadelphia is doing. We elected progressive DAs. We elected people like Councilman Thomas into office so that we passed a lot of criminal justice reform. So we were getting a lot of accolades around how effective Philadelphia had been in terms of addressing these issues. But then, last few years, particularly during the pandemic, we've seen this uptick happen. So now to come back to the table and say, realistically, what can work, what's needed, what's the long-term vision, what's the short-term plan, and be able to put all those resources on the table, include community voices in the mix, make sure that young people are being heard because they're the largest population being impacted right now. Bring in conflict resolution and bring in like therapy and things like that into the schools, I think is going to be helpful. So that's how I believe that we can attack this issue and not wait for other folks to do it and not wait for outside solutions.
Yeah, and I appreciate each one of your perspectives on that. And it's definitely grasping the understanding of the fierce urgency of now, right?
Right.
And with that being the case, of course, this being upcoming political season, election being November 8th, how do we engage the citizens or residents of Philadelphia to be more politically aware of the process of how they can take action through, again, the political lens, because, again, this episode of the Ballot is talking about how do we address it through the advocacy of political activism. So, Philadelphia's had historically low voter turnout, 24% on average, at generally any election. So how do we engage, as each one of you talked about the need for community and people to be involved, which is accurate. We do need to have that thrust in action, but yet there seems to be that gap, 24% at voter turnout. Curtis, how do we address that?
So two things I'm going to say. One is, I'm just going to be totally honest. About 20 years ago, I was one of them people, and I was not part of that 24%. I was part of that 76% when I was 21, 22 years old, because I didn't think my vote mattered. I didn't care. I grew up in North Philadelphia, down 4th and Lehigh, between 4th and Huntington, and I didn't think my vote mattered at all. So I was part of that 70%. I didn't understand politics. I didn't understand what the role of the mayor, what's the role of state rep, what's the city council or city commissioner, what's the role. I didn't understand that my vote will help me live the good life. So it's a couple ways you can attack it. I'm on social media all the time, so I see Councilman Thomas, City Commissioner Omar Sabir, or Kathy Gilmore trying to, for voter registration and stuff like that. That's one way of using social media, that platform. But for me, knocking on them doors, not just any event, just because explaining what are the roles of city council or, the mayor or the city commissioner, and have people understand the people you vote for, this is how they can help you.
Right.
This is how you go to the next level. So I think part of the problem is they just don't know how can they vote help them live that life they want to live. So just educating them through social media and getting involved and knocking on doors in the community. That's the message.
And I get you with that, and that's true. And I want to come to you, Reuben, because me and you have done a lot of work in terms of trying to advocate to get people to get out and vote. But just having them get out to vote and register, it's just like it's a gap there, right? Because you get them to register, but they don't come out, right?
Right.
So how do we, again, because I totally believe what you're saying, Curtis, is true. We have to have them get out and understand how they vote can make a difference in terms of who they put in office, because certain people in office can legislate or put policies in place that can really be beneficial towards programs and services, right? But again, Reuben, how do we get these people even, you register, but then, so then what?
There's definitely a gap between registration and mobilization, right? So let's talk about really making the issues real to community folks. So you mentioned, let's start with the voter registration, right? So a lot of folks, like Mr. Seger said, they don't believe in the system. They don't trust the system. They don't see the system working for them. So voting, to register is one thing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and register. This is my friend asked me to register. They explained it good, right? When it comes to coming out of your house, when it comes to going to the vote poll center, that's a different thing. When it comes to understanding the candidates, right? A lot of times we're not doing that level of research. So we got to make it real. So one of the things that I would suggest, honestly, again, is going back to the schools with some good old fashioned civic engagement, right? Because there's a certain population, and I hate to feel like we're giving up on people, but there's a certain population that they're not going to vote. They're not going to go out there, right?
Right.
We're trying to really inform younger people through the education process, get them connected, get them involved at an early age. So and I'm talking about maybe junior high school through high school, so that once they turn 18, they're more inclined, they're more motivated to vote. You mentioned the 24%. I think that's actually high. We've seen elections in the 9, 10, 11, 12% range. So when you say on average, for the most part, every election is not that. So you're talking about 1 out of 10 eligible voters primarily actually going to the polls and vote for the very people who are making decisions on our lives, right? For the very process that dictates where resources go and how problems are addressed. So, we gotta on the flip side, we gotta invest early on. And I think in terms of that civic engagement process to make sure that children, as they're graduating high school, they understand their responsibility, they're connected as a full citizen in this city, and not just, in name or words only, where they feel like they have some power. Right. And we're starting to see that stem that tide. And that's why, honestly, I just feel like is something that we may not. People came out for Obama. People came out like in this past presidential election because of what we're up against. But for the most part, when we see these midterm elections, we see these localized elections, we don't see that kind of like genuine interest or energy.
Right.
So we got to do, I feel like we got to focus on younger people because that's going to be the next generation that's really determining a lot of these social issues through their vote and who they kind of end up running for office.
Yeah, and I get that, and that's definitely what I believe is the true path to what we're trying to accomplish through the course of this conversation, to get that awareness and enlightenment in that space. But you mentioned something that I want to come to and bring a question to you to, Isaiah, in terms of how do we make sure or put in place the understanding of when someone's running that they have our voice in place in their ear so that they can make the change, because you're there, Councilmember Thomas. You're there in terms of understanding the political process and how, as Reuben said, 24%, can be seen as still a good number. But how do we make sure that there's an awareness and an understanding, as Mr. Segers and Reuben was saying, that these young people whose vote are going to soon matter, not just on a national level, because we can take a look at the national level and say, okay, yeah, it's the president, it's the governors, and those kind of, if you will, the quote unquote sexy elections, right? But when it comes down to offices that you hold, Councilmember Thomas, how do we get people to understand that's kind of the grassroots of it all, to make a difference locally here in our city, to reduce that number of 1,750 homicides or gun-related crimes?
That's a great bounce pass, Jeff. I think listening to what was said prior to me as well, too. Reuben talked about the idea of it being sometimes 11, 12, 13% turnout. I don't know if people know, but traditionally the election that has the least amount of turnout is when we vote for district attorney, city controller, and judge. And if you think about the average Black person, right, they're more likely to be involved or see a judge or be involved in a district attorney's office than you are to see a president or to be involved with a city council member. So it literally makes no sense for us to not participate in any election, but especially those elections, because those are the elections where that judge can decide whether or not you have your kids. That judge can take away your property. The decisions that they make impact our life every single day. So at the end of the day, what was said before me, I agree 100%, especially when we're thinking about the November election. But when we're talking about systemic change as it relates to the culture of voting, there are some things that we have done in the past, like allowing people to be able to vote by mail. That's a big thing. But there are things that we can continue to do to put us in a position where we're changing what our norms are as it relates to elections. The first thing that I would recommend is that we should be teaching, and I know we got an educator on here, but as a former teacher, we should be teaching civics and government and political science the senior year in high school. No teacher is going to push back on that, because the senior year is not a testing year. And a lot of our young people turn 18 their senior year in high school, and they can get registered to vote right there in the classroom. Not only can they get registered to vote, if you teach young people local civics and government, well, they know what the controller is. They know what the district attorney is. They know what city council is. They know what their state legislators are. And that disconnect that we're talking about right now that we need to do as it relates to informing people about the November election, we won't have to do it, because it's the fundamental things that they were been taught in school. I'm a graduate of the school district of Philadelphia, and I can assure you that myself and my colleagues, we didn't get the opportunity to learn civics and government locally. We learned history. We learned American history. We learned about American government. But we didn't learn about the state legislator in high school. And I think that's something that could really make a huge difference. I also think Election Day should be a holiday, right? I know we have vote by mail, and I know we have options for people to be able to vote before Election Day. But Election Day itself should be a day that we celebrate all across the United States of America. We should celebrate local elections and our primaries in the spring, and all national elections, every November election. It should be a holiday. People should be off work. And culturally, if we're talking about a cultural change, that's something that's letting everybody know that elections are important. That 24% number is real. And I know in some elections, we're proud to be at 24%. Sometimes we're up to as high as maybe 40% if it's a presidential election, or like Reuben said, as low as 11% if it's a local election. But at the end of the day, whether it's 11%, 20%, or 40%, I don't think 40% of anything, unless anything is good, unless you talk about shooting 3-pointers. Other than that, I don't want 40% of my paycheck. I don't, 40% is a high number, and that's not really what we want. We want to make sure that the majority of people are participating and engaged in a political process. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening right now. But there are some things that we can do about it, and I just named a few.
Yeah, and I appreciate you naming all of those actually, because each one of those, I know you said there were a few, but they were powerful few, right? And it was funny you said 40% 3-pointers. I wish I could shoot 40%.
I mean, listen, 40% is not a, if my son come home with 40% of his answers on his test right,
I know,
that would be a problem. But if we could get
Yeah,
Matisse Thybulle to shoot 40% from 3-pointer, we might win a championship.
yeah, yeah. But let me just transition back here because that was funny. I just had to highlight that. But with that being the case, so say for example, we understand, because I want to stay here for a minute, just a quick minute, because when you were mentioning, Councilmember Thomas, of getting that class taught in the high school level, my thought just went to why not earlier? Because sometimes it could be that apathy, it's just a class and there's not that level of engagement, though I understand the path that you're going and saying that, okay, if they learn at that space, that gives them opportunity to learn and then be engaged. But why not earlier? Why not maybe, 10th grade, 11th grade, so that they can get some foundational understanding, and then by the 12th grade, they can actually be activated? Just flesh that out for me real quick.
Well, we have people running for governor in November that have two different perspectives on election. And right now we have this idea that a lot of funding and a lot of as far as schools with the AYP, a lot of that is predicated on standardized testing. So I'm putting my educator facilitator hat on. While I would love to teach this in 9th grade or 10th grade, I also understand 9th grade and 11th grade are testing years.
Gotcha.
Today, it's tough to ask teachers to add things to the curriculum that don't put them in a position to be able to help them make AYP on a consistent basis or things like that. So financial literacy, civics and government, coding, like I would love to see it earlier, but I can't ask teachers to do that. All the other things that they have going on, as long as we have this system in place where standardized testing mean as much as they do.
Got you. Thanks for clarifying that. Appreciate that. So Reuben, and in terms of making sure we have the right people in place, making sure we have understanding there, then it comes a matter of the bureaucracy of programming, because there's often funds that are available. As I mentioned, there's the $155 million that was signed off in July of 2021, which is about $208 million, I believe, now this year. I might stand corrected on that number, but it has increased. So, Reuben, from the understanding of the funds, the bureaucracy, and programming, is that throwing money at the problem, or is that really understanding how it can be addressed through the lens of political advocacy? Because, again, some of those funds are tied to certain local politicians who have districts and responsibilities, but yet certain grassroots programs don't see any of those funds. So is it the bureaucracy? Is it throwing money at the problem? And I throw this to you, Reuben, because you have a very, very successful program that's been doing great grassroots work for some time.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, let me just be clear that resources are needed to fight gun violence, to fight all these issues, right? So, but we talking specifically about gun violence. So I don't want to sneeze at like $100 and something million being spent. So while I do applaud that, I do think that we have to look at a big picture, right? Like the long term. I think that the city right now is crying out for immediate answers just because of, we're in a crisis. And I get that, but we also have to accept that even if we throw $1 billion out there today, this problem is not going to be solved in 6 months, right? The way I believe we have to address it is by long-term investment. And by that, I mean, Philadelphia has been noted as the poorest big city in America. So there are upwards of 40% of people living in poverty or deep poverty in this city. So realistically, until we address that, violence ain't going nowhere. We have adults with these high ACEs score, adverse child experiences, when they've been either subject to abuse, violence, neglect, molestation, addiction, incarceration, and some more in their developmental years as a child. And they're suffering the residual effects of that and end up, everybody loves the phrase hurt people. But the reality is heal people as well. So if we can get some healing in our communities, and I mean, not just superficially or with language, but really invest in the healing emotionally and psychologically, then I think people begin to make different decisions. And then, just the fact that we closed, and I'm just going to use North Philadelphia as an example because I do a lot of my work in North Philadelphia. We closed 26 schools. Half of them are in North Philadelphia. If you look around since the rise of the 60s, North Philadelphia, for the most part, hasn't been rebuilt. If we look at, just the high rates of incarceration and then the overlay of that map and along with the gun violence, we'll see a lot of it's perpetrated in North Philly. If you look at the 57 blocks that the Inquiry and the DA's office is talking about, a lot of those blocks are in North Philadelphia. So, and then here's something scary, and it's going to sound really controversial for me to say this, but I want you to just understand what the numbers are, right? So with 1.5 million people, 1.6 million people in our city, and we're at a little bit over 400 murders, right? That's every life is sacred and every loss is tragic. Let me just be real about what I'm about to say. But there's a very small population that's actually committing those murders, right? So even if it was a 1-for-1, we're talking about 400 plus people in this city who's committed an act of murder. Mm-hmm. If we could somehow target resource to get to those 400 people, then we're not dealing with all the hysteria and the crisis. And that's what I need people to understand. That, like, if we aren't able to pinpoint those resources, right? You're gonna hit me for saying this. If we can't pinpoint those resources, we're gonna end up wasting a bunch of money and a bunch of time and losing a lot more money.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your point, Reuben.
No, I just want to say that's where I think that we have to put some energy and thought into. That's it.
Yeah, and that's where I was kind of trying to land and crystallize what I was asking that question is that I know there's resources and money that's needed, whether it's the 155 million or 208 million. There are those funds that are needed. But one, I guess, and I'm going to bring this to you, Curtis, one is how can we use that money to get reach the organizations that actually can make the impact? Because what I've seen in my experience in the city of Philadelphia and even some places across the nation is that through the bureaucracy of those in office, again, this is through the lens of political advocacy, those funds aren't getting to those organizations because of whether it's cronyism, whether it's because of influencing, whether it's because of whatever reasons. Again, the grassroots organizations don't see that 100. I'm just going to do 155 million. Don't get that 155 million because purely, and to be honest, in Philadelphia, I've seen a list of organizations that were awarded that 155 million, and I could beg the question, right? And I know some organizations that could really use those funds. And again, I'm just going to throw this to you, Curtis, because I know your organization is out there doing some great work.
So I'm going to give a shout out to a guy named Art Haywood. Just knowing, so on his website, and I'm not going to promote, but I'm looking on social media that making sure that money's available. So sometimes, like for my nonprofit, I don't know that money's available. I don't know where to find the money or how to get to the money to help, to get the resources that belong in the community. So it's almost like talking about like it's educating people in nonprofits and then grassroots organizations to show them this where the money at, and it's how you get the money to put the proper resources in place to hold everybody accountable though. So when you get the money, like once you got it, it gotta be a check and balances to make sure the money going to the right places. So I think to answer your question, Jeff, is to educate the people that got nonprofit and grassroots organizations of how to get the money. Because some people don't know how to get the money and where to find the money at.
Yeah, and I hear that, Curtis, and I really do. But I think they know how to get the money. I mean, because the money's out there, right? So, and I'm not kind of disagreeing with your answer, but what I am trying.
Throw something out there.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, 30 seconds. I think what Curtis is saying, a lot of grassroots organizations aren't equipped to get the money. So we need some capacity building for those organizations who have great ideas, who have great energy and do great work, but they might not have the infrastructure. For instance, you need banking, you need accounting records, right? You need certain things in place around, boards and like there's a lot that goes into what's asked when you apply for one of those grants. So I believe what he's saying is a lot of them aren't in a position to successfully qualify to get the money. So it becomes this distraction where if you know you can't get it, you're not even applying for it. You're not even
Right.
kind of searching for it. You need it, but you
Right.
don't know where to go to kind of put it all together. Like when they make an announcement
Mhm.
on the news, some people automatically disqualify themselves because they don't have the infrastructure to pursue it. So once you get into that grant world,
Mhm.
the grants open up. And I think that's kind of what he's saying, that if you're not in that track where in the know or have relationships to say there's this grant coming out next month that you need to, be aware of and pay attention to and pursue. So it's two different worlds when we talk about that nonprofit community-based organization kind of
Let me
Yep.
ask
Yep.
you this about
Spot
the
on, Reuben.
Yeah. I was gonna let you.
Spot
I was gonna let you jump in, but I definitely agree with what you're saying, Ruben, and I was grasping that from Curtis. But what I was leading to was more like the latter part of what you were saying was that because those organizations don't have that infrastructure, it's just like, how do you get it if you don't have it? You know what I mean? So it's just like, okay, I would love to apply for it, but I don't have the infrastructure. If I had the funds, I would be able to have the infrastructure. You know what I mean? So it's just like that catch-22. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Councilmember Thomas. You was at the sub table, so now I'm
Yeah,
buzzing when.
I don't want to talk about the infrastructure because I think that's a separate issue. You know what I mean? I
Uh-huh.
think, well, what I will say real briefly is a lot of times what happens is, especially people of color, we have these good hearts and we have like a knack for something. Like, maybe I want to teach baseball or I want to teach coding, and those things we're good at. But then we want to start a nonprofit organization for the thing that we're skilled at. And starting a nonprofit organization is a separate skill in itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think what ended up happening is, we read the requirements, we call our cousin or our aunt, we ask them to sit on the board just so we can get our 501c3. And then when it's time to apply for grants, you're like, well, I don't have a grant writer. Well, that was, when you're talking about the structure of a nonprofit organization, that's one of the first things you do is recruit a grant writer and lawyer and counsel who build your website. And the core thing that you need for your organization to function. We have so many problems in our city that all of us that do this work, we just want to jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be a certain level of plan and preparation to put you in a position to have the infrastructure to be able to collect that. I could talk a lot more about that. About the funds, real quick. First of all, it's not enough money. Those numbers sound great, but when we talk about the actual new money that goes to goes to organizations, it's really not that much money. Most, if not all of the money we gave out was intervention money, which is good. But look at how many teens are both the victims and the culprits. We need prevention money, and that's one of the gaps that exists. Also, I'm sure Reuben is in a space where he can attest to this. The money takes too long for the organizations to actually
Right.
get it. I
Yeah.
get awarded money, in September. Well, I don't get the money until April. Well, how am I supposed to plan a summer program if the check doesn't come until April? And that's if I'm lucky, right? So like that puts people in a position whereas though if I do have the infrastructure and I do get the money, well, now I got to have the money run it and get reimbursed when it comes, and that's asking a lot. That's not really realistic for everybody. We also need to spend money on other stuff that's not just community-based organizations. I'm all for. The first thing I said is we're not putting enough money in a community-based organization. So, but it's a lot of pressure on the community-based organizations when they're getting these checks late, and then everybody want to look up and say, "Well, we don't see no results."
Mm-hmm.
Well, did we put money in the cameras to be able to catch more crimes? Did we put money in the clip and into the streets department to be able to clean up our city? Right, like this. The money should be spent on more than just organizations. We should spend more money on organizations, but we have to spend money other places, and it's not enough. Rue talked about it not being targeted. That's a big, big, big problem. We could look at 12% of our roads in the city of Philadelphia that produce 80% of our car accidents. And if you overlap those same 12% of roads with the crime that we see in the city, it's the same neighborhoods. So a lot of our crime issues can be addressed if we see targeted investment in specific areas. And Reuben's exactly right. It's not happening. The last thing I'll say about this particular issue, our conversation right now is the ballot or the bullet. I'm hoping we're doing a ballot on a consistent basis. And if we're talking specifically about funding for grassroots organizations, while city council can vote for it, we do not select who those organizations are. That is the mayor. You will have the opportunity to vote for a new mayor after this November election. And there is the chance to be able to have your voice heard as it relates to the person you vote for being somebody who will allocate dollars for initiatives like this in ways that people see fit. So when we're talking about the importance of voting and the parallels between your vote and the crime issues that we're seeing in the city of Philadelphia, between this November election and next May election, those two elections are two of the most important elections of our life as it relates to the city of Philadelphia, because we will determine who our next governor is and who our next mayor is, and more money goes into the issue of crime from the city and state than anywhere else.
So Zeke, I'm gonna very powerful point. Thank you for adding that out there. We're coming to a landing here, so I want to wrap it up. I want to get to this quote from Fred Hampton. I believe I sent this out to you guys just to take a look at. I want you, Zeke, to interact with it. Then I want to go to you, Reuben, and wrap it up with you, Curtis. And then I'm going to have maybe one more final question before we close it out. The quote from Fred Hampton: "We've got to do more than talk. We've got to do more than listen. We've got to do more than just learn. We've got to start practicing what we preach. And that's hard. We got to start getting out there with the people, and that's difficult." That's the Ballot of the Bullet. You know, we got to do more than just talk. We got to do more than just listen. We got to do more than just learn. Everything that we've talked about throughout this maybe 40 minutes or so we spent together is real pertinent and powerful, and it lands hard. But we got to start practicing that, and we got to start getting out there with the people. So, Zeke, I want you to interact with that. Then I'm going to come to you, Reuben, then you, Curtis.
Any effective leader embodies that. And at the end of the day, what we do have is we have failed leadership in the city of Philadelphia right now. And that is a big part of the problem that we're seeing. And, you know, you could put me in that category. I'll start with myself. I'll say that I have to step it up a little bit more. I've been trying to do that as of lately. I've been trying to tackle the crime issue myself, and be able to put myself in a position where I'm doing more than just listening to people in briefings, right? I'm not just sitting behind a screen. I'm spending time in gum court. I'm talking to victims of crime. I'm trying my best to go by not just the information that's presented to me, but the lived experiences. And I can't go by lived experiences if I'm not out there. And at the end of the day, even me, it's not enough. And I'm constantly challenging myself to do more. And I think everybody that's on this panel is going to do that. But I think the other thing that we have to do in the midst of getting out there is to inspire people not to give up. It's so easy to give up right now. There's this dark cloud of hopelessness that's falling over the city of Philadelphia. And I'm not talking about the rain from this weekend. Even on sunny days, there's a dark cloud of hopelessness that's fogging the city of Philadelphia. So at the end of the day, getting out there is the only way that we can inspire people to continue to fight the good fight, and then inspire people to not give up on not just our city, but the residents in our city.
Cool. Appreciate that. Reuben?
Yeah, I think I could sum it up with something Councilman Thomas said, that the first thing he said, the community organizations need more money. But the next thing was, we got to focus on more than just community organization, right? There's a lot of needs around this city, from basic trash pickup. When you go around the city, you see just vacant lots and streets being neglected, just from simple things like trash. The children got to walk past and walk through just to go to school. And we understand that they become playgrounds for violence and other nefarious activity. So just having leadership committed to addressing those issues, yeah, we got to talk about it. But we talk to get to the point of solutions. I think there's too many town halls and too many special commissions and too many studies and too many press conferences. At this point, I think we pretty much know what to do. So if we can roll our sleeves up and agree on the first thing to move forward with all the city council, with the district attorney's office, with the police commissioner, with the mayor, because just because you represent a certain district as city council, don't mean you don't represent the rest of the city. And just because you represent the police department, as a commissioner, don't mean you don't serve the whole city. And just because you're a mayor on your way out, doesn't mean you don't still owe the city 100% of your service. So if we can make that demonstration collectively and publicly, whatever that initial decision is to address this very complex issue, then I think that that's the first step in the right direction. Because so many people feel disenfranchised. Most of us, are not out at 3 a.m. I'm talking about the people in this panel and the host. There's an underworld that exists between like midnight and 6 a.m. with a whole different culture, with a whole different set of rules, with a whole different, expectations. So the reality is, if we don't reach those people, right, if we don't reach that population, if we don't reach that community, if we don't pull those people in and make them feel included in the city as a whole, then guess what? they're going to make the impact felt. And that's the reality of what we're dealing with.
Appreciate that. Curtis?
In school, we use a term called a village concept. It takes a village to raise a child. So, Councilman, you made a statement. It's all hands on deck. It shouldn't just be on you, sir, or the mayor, or the council, or or the state rep, whatever. It gotta be all hands on deck.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm telling my age a little bit, but remember Voltron back in the day? How everybody take all how Voltron build up. So that's how we gotta be like Voltron. Listen, let me tell you something. My goal on this call, when I saw the list, to make sure I know I have resources. Councilman, I know you have resources. Reuben, I know you got resources. I'm going to get your phone number off this call. How can I help? How my team can help out? It's like Voltron. It's not on one person. We got to go back to the village concept.
Agreed.
Everybody's involved. All hands on deck. Yo, it'll be a crime if I don't leave my phone number and I'm bugging. Yo, what can I do? What can I got a team. What can my team do? All hands on deck. And no, I love this city. I love it. That's why I'm still here. That's why my wife's still here. Period.
And
I'm sorry.
you know,
That's the part. I mean,
no, and that's serious, and it lands well. And thanks for each one of you interacting with that quote. And it kind of brings us to the point now where, as Malcolm said, there's a common enemy and a common problem. So there should be a common solution. Where is it do we find the time, the energy, the impetus, and the power to put into the hands of the people to find that common solution with a person that's going to champion that cause and that movement? That's the Ballot of the Bullet. We've got to be able to come together as a community to be able to find that person or persons to champion that cause to bring forth the solution. Maybe it's not one person, that's why I said persons, but it is built on the understanding of the community has to have the understanding of how to put that person or persons in a position to bring about change. Because again, as Malcolm said, when people are angry, they cry. But when they want change, they take action. How do we get them to stop, quote unquote, and I'm not talking about anybody in a disparaging way, how do we get them to stop crying and start taking action so that the right people and persons can be in place? So I'll land it with that question to each one of you. We have a few minutes, so if each one of you can, if you will, bite off a chomp of that question and answer it, and then give a solution or give a suggestion on what you believe we can have our viewers take away from this conversation, the Ballot of the Bullet. And I want to start with Councilman Thomas, then I'm come to you, Curtis, and then I'll land it on you, Reuben.
That's a tough question, Jeff, because I think when you're talking about what does it take to inspire people, especially Black folks, we've been, we've been in a tough situation for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And, as somebody who's on the side of government, people don't trust government. And they see government as one cloud that is constantly failing them, from their schools to the criminal justice system to, just answering 911 calls, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, the quote that we had earlier from Fred Hampton is the only thing I can think of that we can do right now. I mean, it starts with not giving up. But we got to get out there and show people. We got to show people this is how it should be done. And this is what can be done. And when I'm talking about showing people, I'm talking about, for me on my side, direct action. When there's an unfortunate situation that's taking place, show up. If we know that there's a prevention-based initiative that's not being funded, advocate for that fund. If we know that there's a part of the neighborhood where there's a lot of blight, what do we need to do to coordinate with the streets department to get it cleaned up and get a camera so it doesn't happen there in the future? Visiting RCOs and talking to community-based organizations, understanding the problems that people are facing and trying your best to put ourselves in a position to be able to solve them. I think a big issue that people have right now, as it relates to my side of it, which is the government side, is that people don't feel like they're getting a bang for their buck. I, as much as I'm paying in taxes and as much as, I'm doing as it relates to the things that the city are asking for, when I'm asking for basic services and basic results, people aren't necessarily getting that. So on my end, my job is to show up, is to be there, is to listen to those issues and try my best with every single constituent I talk to to be able to rectify that wrong and turn it into a right. And that sounds like a bunch of fluff coming from a politician, but anybody who knows me know, I'm serious about that. I'm very accessible. I try my best to respond to every constituent, even though after it does become a little bit overwhelming. But at the end of the day, I represent government. They see me as a part of that cloud, and it's my job to understand that everybody who interacts with me needs to leave that interaction with at least a small little piece of hope as it relates to their experience with government, and recognizing that government's responsibility is to work for them, not the other way around.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Zeke. And just from me and my personal take on that, you are not a cloud. You are definitely one of the many ray of light. So I appreciate you and your comments on that, because you're making a difference, and it can be seen. Curtis.
I feel like Joe Dumars, he threw like an alley-oop. I feel like Joe Dumars right now. Like, he just threw. I'm about to spot up real quick. I'm sorry, I got excited. I go over my camera. I apologize. I'm gonna say a couple things. I believe in hope, right? That's why I'm here. I grew up in, they call the Badlands down Fourth, like I said, Lehigh, and I had hope. Even though my environment said another thing, somebody gave me hope. But it got to be hope with a plan. They didn't just give me hope. It was a whole plan go behind it. So make them stop crying. It's not just hope. It's hope with a plan. Isaiah, I'm going to be very frank with you, sir. We have a lot of common people. Not one person said not one word bad about you. I keep it. If they did, I wouldn't even bring this up. So you're what you call a transformative leader. So you lead people and you inspire people. That's how they stop crying. When you give them hope and you got leaders transforming them and making them into leaders, that's powerful. So salute to you, King. Seriously. If I didn't, I wouldn't have said it out loud. My last piece, my professor, God rest his soul, Dr. J.B. Flynn. I went to Cheney University, first black college. I said it. The moon is a hell of a light if you've never seen the sun. Go over to North Philly, West Philly, wherever you're from. A lot of people see the moon. The moon's a heck of a light. But when you take them outside and show them the sun and they can do better, it's powerful. Then you can start wiping your tears a little bit. It's powerful. Now it's hope. Now you really can do something about it. So I guess the answer is, Jeff, when they wipe their tears, you have leaders and you show them hope and you give them a plan with it, though. And show them how to live the good life.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I like that quote from your professor. Appreciate that. Reuben.
Yeah, as a proud Lincoln graduate, I salute you, my brother. It's all right. But I mean,
I read your bio. I read your bio, Mr. Reuben.
That's why you threw that in there. But
I threw it in there.
That's funny. But I just want to say, I think that I'm going to keep it simple. We talk about these overlays, and we got to do some political education in the communities, because these overlays are so severe with poverty, with violence, with neglect, with streets, with trash removal, with poor lighting. These are simple quality of life issues that can be addressed like that. Like that's something we can literally do with effective leadership. And that changed the way people see their community, it changed the way they see themselves. It changes that hopelessness because they feel heard. And that's when you start to get people engaged. I'm just going to give you one quick example.
Let me add an attachment to that real quick. Not only can it be done right now, we have the money to do it.
Bingo. Say less, as the young boys say. That's where I'm at. So let's do that. You know what I mean? So that's it for me, Jeff.
Okay, cool. So real quick, as we wrap up, I would be remiss if I did not allow for our viewers and listeners to get an opportunity to know how to reach out to each one of you. So let me backtrack and go Reuben, Curtis, and Isaiah. Give our viewers and listeners how they can reach out to you, because I know as they were listening to it, if they caught probably the tail end of this, it's like, wow, there's some great stuff. And they probably want to learn more about the initiatives and services that each one of you have to offer. So if you could real quick give maybe a phone number, email, how they could reach out to you as we come to the tail end of this Ballot or the Bullet special episode of WPPM Fest, People Powered Media, Radio, Television.
Who'd you want to go first?
I want you to go first.
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, you can reach me at Frontline. You can email me at frontlinedads@aol.com or 484-532-8255. 8772.
Cool. And we'll have that information listed. Then you, Isaiah, and then we'll land it on you, Curtis.
Sure. So the best way to reach out to me in my office is the email isaiah.thomas@phila.gov, isaiah.thomas@phila.gov. I'm also on all social media platforms. I'm pretty active. This was Isaiah Thomas for Philly on Instagram. It's Councilman Thomas PHL on Twitter, as well as Candidate Thomas on Twitter. And on Facebook, you could just look at my Councilman Isaiah Thomas Facebook page. And again, my team and I were very responsive as it relates to social media as well as email. Jeff, thank you for having me, and to the amazing panel. I look for Reuben. I love working with you and going to continue to advocate for Frontline Dads. Frontline Dads is an amazing organization that the city just doesn't fund the way it should be. And every year when I'm fighting for a budget, I got them as part of my budget priority, and I'm going to continue to do that. And Reuben has never asked me that, right? Like, that's just me recognizing the work that he does and knowing that, at some point somebody's going to listen and give them the funding that they need to continue to do that good work. I know I just got off track a little bit, but that's my information. If there's anything that my office could do to help anybody, please let us know. We're here.
Appreciate that.
Definitely.
Curtis?
Yeah, my email address is csegersii@comcast.net, or you could DM me on Instagram, the Segers Foundation. Either one.
Cool. Again, we appreciate each one of you for taking the time to be part of this special episode of Community Voice PHL Talk Show, the Ballot or the Bullet, as we understand how do we get people engaged in the political process to help reduce gun violence. This is a very important issue, and we thank you for sharing your very important insight and information. And if you want to continually follow and support Community Voice and the work that we're doing at WPPMLP Philadelphia, check us out on Instagram at Community Voice PHL. Follow us on Facebook at Community Voice PHL. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or want to highlight anything that's happening in your community, send us an email to communityvoicephl@gmail.com. Please subscribe to our Apple Podcast, again, Community Voice PHL, and check us out on YouTube at Community Voice PHL Talk Show, and you can be informed, engaged, and inspired on the go. So again, thanks for tuning into this special episode. Thanks to my panelists, Councilmember-At-Large Isaiah Thomas, founder of Frontline Dads, Reuben Jones, CEO of the Segers Foundation, Curtis Segers, and we appreciate the conversation and the information that was shared. That's all the time we have, and again, appreciate your support. And remember, if it's happening in your community, we need to hear your voice. Peace.
Thank you.